In the history of aviation, there have been few aircraft which have become legends in their own lifetime. One such was the de Havilland Mosquito, which saw service in many guises during the Second World War. The story of the Mosquito begins in 1936, at a time when German rearmament was no longer a secret and was beginning to threaten the peace of Europe. It was Hitler's creation of a powerful air force which gave most concern. Then, in March 1936, Hitler sent his troops into the Rhineland, which had been demilitarized after the end of the Great War. In the face of this growing threat, the British had slowly begun to rearm, with priority being given to the Royal Air Force. Specifications were drawn up for new aircraft to replace the obsolescent types of the day. Among these was one issued in 1936 for a high-speed twin-engine bomber, which could also be used for reconnaissance. A basis for such an aircraft already existed in the de Havilland DH-88 Comet. This aircraft had in 1934 won the England to Melbourne air race, part of the centenary celebrations of this Australian city. In 1937, the Comet was converted into a four-engine airliner, the Albatross, which was used as a transatlantic mail carrier. What was significant about the design of this aircraft was that it was of wooden rather than metal construction. De Havilland believed that wood offered a number of advantages, not least its availability. Furthermore, they became convinced that the Air Ministry specification was wrongly drawn up. For the Air Ministry had in mind a heavily armed bomber which could, if necessary, fight its way through to the target. The result was the Avião Manchester, which came into service in 1941, but was unpopular with its crews because of the unreliability of its engines. A modified version, powered by 4 engines instead of 2, was introduced the following year. This was the Avião Lancaster, which proved to be one of the outstanding bombers of the Second World War. But back in the late 1930s, as war clouds loomed over the horizon, the Air Ministry had shown little enthusiasm for de Havilland's all-wooden concept. In March 1938, German troops had entered Austria. Hitler declared Anschluss, or union between the two countries, and turned his eyes on Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia's westernmost province. His pretext for annexing it was its sizable German minority, but the Czechs resisted his demands and war appeared imminent. Only 2 visits by British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain to Germany in September 1938 averted war, but with Sudetenland handed over to Hitler. Realists in Britain did not believe Hitler's assurance that he had no further territorial ambitions, or Chamberlain's claim that he had bought peace in our time. He had merely postponed the now inevitable war in Europe. Hence the pace of rearmament quickened, with de Havilland continuing to pursue their all-wooden concept. They now took their DH-95 Flamingo airliner as a starting point, believing that a smaller aircraft might provide the solution. For if the aircraft was fast enough, it could evade enemy fighters and therefore would not have to sacrifice payload for weapons, ammunition, and additional crew members. But fearful that the Germans might develop fighters which could catch the de Havilland bomber, the Air Ministry remained wedded to the heavily armed metal concept. On the 3rd of September 1939, the war which had been increasingly expected in Britain became fact. De Havilland immediately approached the Air Ministry again, but only Air Marshal Sir Wilfrid Freeman, responsible for research and development, showed positive interest. During the early months of the war, the few RAF bomber attacks were against German warships in port. but they suffered heavy casualties from German fighters, calling into question the belief that the heavily armed bomber would always get through. Meanwhile, de Havilland continued to persevere. Eventually, in January 1940, and under pressure from Air Marshal Freeman, the Air Ministry agreed to fund a bomber reconnaissance prototype. This enabled the de Havilland design team, which had taken up residence at an historic English country house, Salisbury Hall, north of London, to finalize their work on the project. The winter of 1939-40 was particularly severe. The phony war was now at its height, as the British and French waited for Hitler to make a move against them. It meant, though, that de Havilland could work on the prototype undisturbed, and they were further encouraged in March 1940 when the Air Ministry placed an order for 50 aircraft. In early April 1940, the phony war came to an end when the Germans invaded Denmark and Norway. The following month, the main German blow came in the west, against France and the Low Countries. Within the space of just 6 weeks, these countries were overrun. The British Expeditionary Force had been evacuated from the French port of Dunkirk, and Britain now stood alone against Hitler. Lord Beaverbrook, Minister for Aircraft Production, was conscious that Britain needed defensive weapons with which to resist a German invasion. He therefore cancelled the de Havilland order so that production could be concentrated on fighters. As the RAF duelled with the Luftwaffe in the skies over England, de Havilland pleaded with Beaverbrook to change his mind. Eventually, he did so. By mid-September 1940, the Battle of Britain had been won, but the country was now enduring prolonged bombing attacks, mainly by night, the so-called Blitz. Production of the Mosquito, as the de Havilland aircraft was now called, was starting at Hatfield, some 35 miles north of London. However, on the morning of the 3rd of October, a lone Junkers Ju-88 attacked the factory, destroying 80% of the machine parts and inflicting 90 casualties on the workforce. Luckily, the prototypes were being assembled at Salisbury Hall and escaped damage. Indeed, the bomber prototype had already been completed. This had made its first flight in conditions of great secrecy 2 days before the Hatfield attack. This convinced the design team that they had a winner on their hands. During the next few months, this prototype was thoroughly tested, and the few inherent bugs ironed out. Fighter and photographic reconnaissance prototypes were also flown. Production of all three types now began in earnest. Mosquito factories were set up in Canada and then Australia. The first Mosquito variant to come into service was the unarmed photographic reconnaissance version. This made its first operational sortie in mid-September 1941. The first reconnaissance type had a range of nearly 2,200 miles, was capable of flying at 35,000 feet, and had a top speed of just over 380 miles per hour. By the end of the war, range had increased to nearly 3,500 miles, top speed to 425 miles per hour, and ceiling to 43,000 feet. The photo reconnaissance version of the Mosquito was used in every theater of war. It seldom failed to bring back the information asked of it. One of the Mosquito's major successes was bringing back the first firm evidence that the Germans were developing V-1 flying bombs and V-2 free-flight rockets. Mosquitoes also photographed targets by night. Others were used to check the weather over enemy territory. The Americans also used the reconnaissance mosquito, calling it the F-8. The fighter version was primarily used at night. The reason for this was the development of airborne interception radar, which was operated by the navigator. This enabled him to acquire targets and guide the pilot onto them.
1:15, 1 o'clock 15, range about 600, throttle back a little, just almost synchronized speed.
Okay, I can see him, keep going.
It's 88, definitely.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. We'll drop back.
Right. Range is going out to about 450 again.
Okay. Well, this ought to shake him.
Began to escort British bombers over Germany in order to ward off Luftwaffe attacks. The Mosquito day fighter was mainly used by RAF Coastal Command as a shipping escort and to attack German aircraft protecting U-boats in the Bay of Biscay. In June 1944, however, Hitler launched his V-1 flying bomb offensive against Britain. Mosquito fighter squadrons played a large part in shooting them down. Trials were also undertaken to use Mosquitoes in the anti-shipping role by arming them with a version of Barnes-Wallis's famous bouncing bomb, which was used in the spectacular attack on the German Ruhr dams in May 1943. This bomb, codenamed Upkeep, was not, however, used in action. Mosquitoes with folding wings were also ordered by the Royal Navy for use on aircraft carriers, but they came into service only after the end of the war. The most famous Mosquito variant was undoubtedly the fighter bomber. It could carry up to 2,000 pounds of bombs, or a mixture of bombs and 8 rockets mounted under its wings. It was also armed with 20mm cannon and machine guns in its nose. This type of Mosquito proved to be very versatile. A large number operated with RAF Bomber Command. Some of these helped to mark targets with incendiaries. Others bombed in their own right, often attacking Berlin and targets even further afield, in order to divert the German air defenses from the main heavy bomber force. Mosquitoes, too, were increasingly used for precision attacks by day, the ultimate test for the crews. The first of these took place on the 25th of September, 1942, when 4 aircraft took off from the north of Scotland. They had been briefed to attack the Gestapo headquarters in the Norwegian capital, Oslo, in order to destroy its records on the Norwegian resistance movement. The aircraft flew over the North Sea and reached their target, but their bombs missed and 1 Mosquito was shot down. More audacious was an operation led by Wing Commander Reynolds.
I was fortunate enough to lead the first formation of Mosquitoes, which bombed Berlin in daylight.
He took off with 2 other mosquitoes on the 30th of January 1943, the 10th anniversary of Hitler's accession to power. They struck at Berlin's Wilhelmstrasse radio station and forced a postponement of a live broadcast speech by Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring to a rally of the faithful. A few hours later, a second attack on the radio station disrupted a speech by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. Both operations caused the Nazi authorities much embarrassment. The attacks also served as an enormous boost to British and indeed Allied morale. It was, however, a series of precision attacks during the last part of the war which really brought the mosquito into the limelight. These operations involved flying at very low level and were designed to help the resistance movements in German-occupied Europe. In January 1944, London received a plea from the French resistance to help spring 100 of their members, who were awaiting execution in Avião jail in northern France. The only feasible option was a precision bombing attack to create breaches in the prison walls, to enable the inmates to escape. It was an ideal mosquito mission. Group Captain Charles Pickard was selected to lead the attack. He was a highly decorated pilot who had come into the public eye in 1941, when he played the lead role in a documentary film about RAF Bomber Command, Target for Tonight. 19 mosquitoes took off on the 18th of February 1944. They flew low across the English Channel. 12 Typhoon fighters provided the escort. The mosquitoes reached the French coast and set course for their target. The first wave of aircraft attacked the east wall of the jail, but failed to breach it. The second wave went for the north wall and was successful, also bombing the German Guards mess hall. Pickard called off the remaining aircraft. As he did so, the mosquitoes were jumped by German FW-190 fighters. These shot down 2 aircraft, including Pickard's. The jail itself was extensively damaged, but 150 of the prisoners became casualties, and nearby houses and a hospital were also hit. Nevertheless, an amazing 258 prisoners managed to escape through the breach. Local French people found the bodies of Pickard and his navigator and buried them. In April 1944, 6 mosquitoes flew at just 50 feet over the North Sea to make a successful attack on a building in the Dutch city of The Hague.
There's that highway. Our ETA will be up in 5 minutes. Okay, set up your equipment. There it is, dead ahead.
This target housed records used by the Germans to persecute the Dutch, and the aircraft used 500-pound delayed action bombs to destroy it. On the 31st of October 1944, mosquitoes attacked a similar target, records housed in Aarhus University in the Danish province of Jutland. Surprise was total. In Indeed, it was not until the aircraft was streaming away from their target that the German anti-aircraft guns came to life. At the very end of 1944, the Mosquitoes revisited the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo. The Germans were more alert than they had been at Aarhus. All 12 Mosquitoes were hit by flak, and damage to the Gestapo HQ was slight. Worse, over 100 Norwegian civilians were killed and wounded, and 1,000 people made homeless. It was the Danish capital Copenhagen which witnessed what was perhaps the most spectacular of these pinprick raids. Once again, the target was a Gestapo headquarters. This was situated in the former Shell Oil Company offices. The planners went to great lengths to obtain as much intelligence as possible on the building, especially since it was situated in one of the most densely populated areas of the city. Danish resistance workers stole a boat and took photographs of the building from the seaward approach, which was to be used by the aircraft. These were smuggled back to Britain. A large model of Copenhagen was constructed so that the air crews could study their approach in detail. Just after dawn on the 21st of March 1945, 18 Mosquitoes took off from England, one of them piloted by a senior officer, Air Vice Marshal Basil Embry, who was the mastermind behind this type of Mosquito operation. So low did the aircraft fly over the North Sea that their windscreens became coated in salt. Then they were over the land. The first wave now raced in and struck the Shell building with incendiary bombs, setting it alight. The second wave was confused by the fires, and so turned and came in again. Unfortunately, the wing of the leading aircraft struck a flagpole, and it was catapulted into a nearby school. Following aircraft mistook this for the Shell building and dropped their bombs on it. Tragically, 27 teachers and 87 children were killed. On the credit side, the Shell building was largely destroyed, along with most of the Gestapo records. Furthermore, some 30 Danish resistance members incarcerated there managed to escape. While these raids resulted in casualties to innocent civilians, they did save numerous resistance lives. The sight, too, of Mosquitoes flying at treetop level acted as an enormous boost to the morale of the peoples of the German-occupied countries of Western Europe. Such was the versatility of the Mosquito that many air forces throughout the world continued to use it during the immediate post-war years. It saw action with the Israelis in their war of independence against their Arab neighbors during 1948-49. The French used it against the Viet Minh in Indochina. Chiang Kai-shek's Air Force flew it in the last stage of the long-running Chinese Civil War. The British used it during their campaign against the communist terrorists in Malaya. When production of the Mosquito finally ceased in 1950, nearly 8,000 had been produced. Indeed, it was only the coming into widespread service of the combat jet that brought about its demise. But this was not before Mosquitoes had overflown the world's highest mountain, Everest. The dedication of those who designed it and the bravery and skills of the crews who flew it deservedly gave the de Havilland Mosquito its nickname, the Wooden Wonder. They made it one of the most famous aircraft of all time. And more recently, some women as well. The sheer joy of flying, the freedom of the open skies and the independence that the pilot enjoys are strong attractions. Flying a modern, fast jet calls for a high degree of technical skill, and only a minority of people have an aptitude for it. But although the modern fighter travels ever faster, the demands on its pilot have not changed radically. His role has always been to shoot down hostile aircraft. The fighter pilot came into being in the skies over the Western Front in 1915. Most military aircraft at the outbreak of war in 1914 were designed for unarmed reconnaissance and were known as scouts. It was soon realized, however, that opposing scouts had to be prevented from gaining information, and hence they were gradually armed and became known as fighting scouts. But early aircraft armament was crude, with pilots usually installing their own. Thus, early British ace Major Lano Hawker often attacked German scouts with just rifle and revolver fire. He did, however, then manage to fit a forward-firing machine gun on the side of the fuselage forward of the cockpit. This had, however, to fire obliquely in order to avoid shooting off the propeller blades, and made accurate aiming very difficult. Frenchman Roland Garros fixed steel deflectors on the propeller blades of his monoplane Morin-Saulnier, and enjoyed some success before being shot down. After examining his aircraft, Dutch aircraft designer Anthony Fokker developed a gear which synchronized the fire of the gun with the sweep of the blades. Fitted with this, the Fokker Eindecker monoplane was master of the skies over France and Flanders during autumn 1915. This was even though its top speed was a mere 80 miles per hour, and it could not climb above 10,000 feet. 1916 saw the French and British regain the initiative, but it was in 1917 that the fighter aircraft began to come of age. German Fokkers and Albatrosses dueled daily with British SE-5s and Camels and French Spads and Nieuports over the Western Front. But while these aircraft could fly at over 100 miles per hour, aerial combat still tended to take place well below 10,000 feet. Some fighter pilots soon began to stand out from the majority as the ones who were shooting down the bulk of enemy aircraft. But what was their secret? Many men volunteered to fly, but the majority never qualified as pilots. Some simply did not have the natural coordination to make good pilots. Others, through no fault of their own, were victims of their antiquated and often worn-out training aircraft. Of the 14,000 British pilots who lost their lives during the war, 8,000 did so while under training. But being a good pilot was not enough on its own. He had to be a good shot, and this from a very unstable platform at a target traveling at more than 100 miles per hour. Ingenious methods were used to perfect shooting skills. But the machine guns of the day were prone to mechanical stoppages, and the pilot had to be able to deal with these and change magazines while flying his aircraft. Many pilots insisted on loading their own magazines and belts, since one round incorrectly positioned would cause the gun to stop firing at a critical moment in combat. The leading fighter pilots were skilled in these arts and became known as aces. 5 enemy aircraft confirmed shot down was the price of admission to this select band. But the aces were often so successful because of their ability to literally sense the whereabouts of enemy aircraft. They also had lightning reactions. To the people of the combatant nations, the war in the air seemed to have a cleanness and glamour that the mud and blood of the trenches did not. Governments, recognizing the morale value of the aces, gave them publicity. Thus, they became widely acclaimed heroes. Indeed, anyone wearing wings was regarded almost as a god by the civilian population. The French aces included Georges Guynemer, a man who appeared so slight in stature that it was difficult to believe that he had the strength to handle his aircraft's controls. He flew Spads, and indeed had his own personal aircraft with a massive 37mm cannon mounted in the nose. Guynemer led the famous Stork Squadron in 1917. So hard did he press home attacks that he was shot down 8 times and wounded twice before he was finally killed. In contrast, René Fonck relied solely on the deadly accuracy of his shooting and was never touched by an enemy bullet. Charles Nungesser, on the other hand, suffered numerous injuries from his several crashes, but was a born survivor. The leading British ace of 1917 was 20-year-old Albert Ball. His main relaxation when he was not flying was to play the violin. Another outstanding British ace was James McCudden, a man of humble origins who, like Ball, won the Victoria Cross for bravery. Neither Ball nor McCudden survived the war. 2 Canadians did, however. One was the top-scoring Allied ace, with 72 victories to his credit. This was Billy Bishop, who later attained high rank in the Royal Canadian Air Force. As did fellow Canadian ace Raymond Collishaw, with 60 confirmed kills during the course of 2 years air fighting. The Americans, although they did not join the war until April 1917, also had their aces. Their top scorer was Eddie Rickenbacker, who, at the age of 27, was considered old for a fighter pilot. But he'd been a successful racing driver, which had helped him develop the necessary instinctive, quick reactions needed by a fighter pilot. There was also Raoul Lufbery, who flew with the French before his country declared war, and passed on to Rickenbacker all that he knew about air fighting. Early German aces included Max Immelmann, known as the Eagle of Lille. He was the inventor of the famous Immelmann turn, which enabled him to quickly get onto the tail of an opposing aircraft. There was too Oswald Bölker, whose Dicta Bölker neatly summarized the secrets of being an effective fighter pilot. Use the advantage of height, attack from the rear with the sun at one's back, press home the attack and only fire at close range. If attacked from above, turn to meet the enemy. Another German fighter ace was Hermann Goering. Winner of Prussia's highest award, the Pour le Mérite, or Blue Max, he would rise to become Hitler's deputy. But his days would end in the dock at Nuremberg in 1945. Rather than face the hangman's noose, he took his own life. Most famous of all the German fighter pilots was Baron Manfred von Richthofen. Indeed, with 80 victories to his credit, he was the top-scoring ace of the war. Von Richthofen eventually commanded a wing of some 60 aircraft, which became known as the Flying Circus, from the variegated colors in which they were painted. He was a great collector of trophies from the aircraft he shot down, but he treated the surviving pilots of his victims with great chivalry. Von Richthofen's all-red Fokker triplane earned him the nickname the Red Baron. but like so many, he too fell in combat in April 1918. Such was the respect of Allied flyers for him that he was buried with full military honors by his British and Australian adversaries. Von Richthofen's standing was so high in Germany that after the war, his body was brought home from France for reburial. Likewise, when French-American Raoul Lufbery was shot down in flames in May 1918, his passing was mourned by Americans and Frenchmen alike. The spirit of the aviators of 1914-18 lived on after the war. Indeed, during the 1920s, fighter aircraft changed little in outward appearance. The general public also became imbued by the romance of the air and flocked to flying displays. Every fighter pilot yearned to be a member of the aerobatic teams, which always stole the show. The biplane fighter remained in service until the mid-1930s.
Homens de toda parte do mundo vieram para...
Had a significantly higher rate of climb and could operate at altitudes well over 30,000 feet. The pilot now had to think and react very much faster. Indeed, it was now recognized that the qualities needed to fly a 4-engine bomber with a crew of up to 10 men were different to the individualism of the single-seater flyer. As a result, air forces began to be more selective, and student pilots were closely monitored in terms of optimum suitability for the various types of aircraft. But trainee fighter pilots still had to learn to fly in formation and operate as part of a team. Yet in spite of the very much faster pace of aerial combat, the Second World War fighter pilot enjoyed some significant advantages over his Great War counterpart. One was radio, which enabled a flyer to talk to his fellow pilots in the air. Ground controllers also used radio to pass on information on approaching enemy aircraft. Before 1939, it was widely believed that the bomber would always get through, but fighter squadrons could get into the air in time to intercept the bombers before they reached their target. The necessary early warning was provided by radar, which had been developed during the 1930s. Another advantage that the pilot of 1939-45 had was the parachute, although German pilots had begun to be issued with it during the last months of the war in 1918. This saved many lives in combat. Tactics also underwent changes. Between the wars, the Royal Air Force developed a series of set-piece fighter attack drills based on the 3-aircraft Vic. German fighter pilots of the Condor Legion, supporting Franco's nationalists during the Spanish Civil War, adopted a more flexible formation, made up of 2 pairs of aircraft and called the Finger 4. This was very much more flexible than the RAF's rigid tactics and caused it and other air forces to adopt this formation. In the summer of 1940, there took place the epic struggle for air ascendancy in the British skies that became known as the Battle of Britain. This proved to be one of the most intense air battles of all time. The numerically inferior RAF soon became aware that it was not the number of aircraft they lost which was crucial. They could be quickly replaced. But reserves of fighter pilots were slender at the outset, and the time taken to train them meant that it became increasingly difficult to match the supply of new pilots to the rate of loss. Furthermore, as was found during 1914-18, the stress of combat flying meant that pilots had to be rested if they were to survive. During the last stage of the war, the Germans also experienced pilot problems, but for a different reason. Allied bombing increasingly crippled fuel supplies. This meant less was available for training pilots, who were posted to combat units before they were ready. They were easy meat for the better trained Allied pilots. Eventually, such was the lack of fuel that many German fighters had to be grounded. During the Battle of Britain, the German fighters tended to regard their own bombers as bait for the British fighters. They flew well above the bombers and then attacked once the Hurricanes and Spitfires were engaged with them. After the United States entered the war in December 1941, the US 8th Air Force was deployed to Britain, primarily to join in the bombing of Germany. The Americans believed that their heavily armed bombers could see off fighters by day. They adopted a box-like formation in order to make best use of their defensive firepower. P-47 Thunderbolts escorted the bombers, but their range meant that they had to turn back when the bombers penetrated deep into Germany. This enabled the German fighters to strike unhindered by opposing aircraft, and in spite of their armament, the American bombers suffered. On some occasions, up to a third of the American bombers were shot down. In early 1944, however, the long-range P-51D Mustang began to operate as a bomber escort. This turned the tide. Fierce air battles also took place in the Pacific, often involving carrier-borne fighters. Indeed, the aircraft carrier became the principal weapon in an ocean covering hundreds of thousands of square miles. Up until mid-1943, the Japanese Mitsubishi Zero fighter proved to be superior to its Allied counterparts. It was only the appearance of the US Navy's Grumman Hellcat that swung the pendulum in the Allies' favor. Perhaps, however, the most unusual fighter group to take part in the war against Japan was Colonel Claire Chennault's Flying Tigers. This was a group of American volunteer pilots in P-40 Tomahawks who began to support the Chinese even before America entered the war and achieved some significant success. As the war progressed, fighters became ever faster. Indeed, the American P-47M Thunderbolt of 1944 could attain a speed of just over 470 miles per hour. The increased speed at which air battles were fought might have resulted in less aircraft being shot down, but this was not so. More powerful 20 or 30 millimeter cannon took over from the caliber's 7.5 millimeter machine gun. More important was the development of the gyroscopic gun sight, which dramatically increased accuracy. German Erich Hartmann, decorated by Hitler with the diamonds to the Knight's Cross and one of only 27 recipients of it, was the top ace of 1939-45, with no less than 352 victories to his credit. Remarkably, he didn't shoot down his first aircraft until November 1942. Such was his success that the Russians called him the Black Devil and put a price on his head. Many other German fighter pilots had over 100 kills. They included debonair Adolf Galland, who saw continuous combat from 1937 in Spain until the end of the war in 1945. Many of the German successes were, however, achieved during the early part of the war on the Eastern Front, when the Soviet fighters and their pilots were markedly inferior to those of the Luftwaffe. In contrast, the top American ace, Major Richard Bong, who served in the Pacific, achieved a mere 40 confirmed kills in his P-38 Lightning. Similarly, Johnny Johnson, the leading British fighter pilot, had an official score of just 38 aircraft shot down. But Allied verification of claims was much more rigorous than the Germans. In mid-1944, however, the first in-service jets had appeared. The Germans had the Messerschmitt Me-262, which they used against Allied bombers by day. Although the Me-262 could fly at 540 miles per hour, Allied piston-engined aircraft could still shoot it down. The British had the Gloucester Meteor, which at 410 miles per hour was considerably slower than the Me-262. Its first and main role was combating the German V-1 flying bombs, then raining down on Britain. There was no jet versus jet combat during World War II, and some believed that it would not be possible. But during the Korean War of 1950-53, American F-86 Sabres clashed with Russian-built MiG-15s on numerous occasions. This proved that air combat at speeds of over 600 miles per hour was more than feasible. A little over a decade later, the air-to-air missile made its appearance and soon began to take over from the cannon as the fighter's main armament, although the latter was still mounted. Missiles were first used in combat during the 1967 Arab-Israeli War and also in Vietnam. Today, in the 1990s, the fighter pilot operates in an ever more technically sophisticated environment. His aircraft is highly computerized. His head-up display presents what he needs to know. But today's fighter pilots need ever more training to become proficient. The US Navy's Top Gun School epitomizes what this training entails.
How to stay alive in combat, mostly. We teach them everything from the basics of 1 versus 1 to multi-plane tactics, but how to stay alive and how to kill.
Only the very cream of pilots attend schools like Top Gun, as the potential fighter aces of the future. The students do everything apart from actually firing their missiles and guns in anger. And the ultimate test is simulated combat at supersonic speeds against Top Gun graduates. This may be the closest to combat that some fighter pilots may actually come. Yet even though technology dominates their lives, their spirit and dedication are no different to that of their forebears down through the century.